All right. We are right at the top of the hour. So I think we are about ready to get started. So welcome to everybody who has joined us on the call. This is SigmaSight's first webinar about offer packages, and we are thrilled that everybody is here joining us. So without any further ado, I will pass things over to our host and MC, Taylor Smith.
That's great. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. We're going to jump right into it. I'm going to move very quickly. I'm Taylor Smith, president of Suite 200 Solutions, and I'm also an advisor to SigmaSight. And I'm very pleased that they've agreed to host this webinar on a topic that I think is of critical importance to our industry today. Let me make very quick introductions to the panelists that we have today, starting with Ron Morrison, who's a divisional senior vice president of claims at Great American Insurance. Ron, on a more personal level, is probably one of the more innovative and hands-on claim executives that I know of. And he's also the 2025 CLM Litigation Management Professional of the Year award winner, which is a tremendous accomplishment. Jason Rosen is the founder and principal of Rosen Resolution. Jason is deeply experienced on both sides of the bar and is exceptionally well respected and recognized for his ability to help parties negotiate successful conclusions to disputes, and that really sums up what good negotiation is all about. J.D. Keister is the head of the liability practice at McCangus, Schooldelach, and Curry. I think that JD is helping to lead some of the most innovative approaches in the defense industry today in a law firm that just seems to be growing by leaps and bounds. Many of you already know JD because he's helped to lead our industry through the Litigation Management Institute, the Litigation Management Symposium, and in fact, the litigation management track of the CLM Claims College as well. So let's get right into it, and welcome to each of our panelists. The topic of today's webinar is about arming claims teams for successful negotiation. This is something that I think all of us agree is an important topic. It's something that we at Suite 200 Solutions have just done a very interesting industry snapshot about, interviewing 56 senior claim executives, chief claim officers, heads of litigation on best practices within the defense industry. This webinar is based on three very direct assertions. The first assertion is that the plaintiff bar is adopting AI and technology faster than defense teams. That's the starting point. The second assertion is that this adoption is driving up settlement values, principally through persuasive, evidence-rich, evidence-based demand packages. Many of you know Even-Up Law raised $250 million in 18 months, unicorn status now. Thousands of plaintiff firms are using their tool. It's a particularly insidious kind of threat in a certain way because when we receive demand packages, we don't know necessarily that Even-Up has prepared them, although we'll talk about some of those attributes in a second. The third assertion is simply this, that the defense teams, defense industry, needs to acknowledge this adoption of technology on the plaintiff side and needs to respond in order to level the playing field. And that's really the reason why we've assembled such a fantastic group here today. So let me jump right into it. And Jason, I'm going to start with you if I can. From your perspective as a mediator, how have you seen the plaintiff and defense sides evolve in their preparation for mediations that you're facilitating, and in general, their negotiation tactics over the last 2 to 3 years? What can you share with us about that?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to come and speak with you. I think for various reasons in the last several years, whether it be the COVID effect, some societal changes, right, there is this value creep that we've seen. And I think we know that typically plaintiffs tend to be a little more proactive. I think the default is wait for the plaintiffs to prepare a settlement demand and then respond to that. But because of technology, and because frankly, I think they're better staffed per file. You've got legal assistants putting together these packages and sending them out, and there's multiple legal assistants for every attorney at most personal injury firms. They get the message out sooner, first, and kind of are able to set the tone. Because they're using this technology, and I think because of some of these societal changes, plaintiffs have become a little more emboldened in sort of sticking to their guns, not being as flexible in their negotiations. And I think to some extent that may be to the detriment of some of their clients, but they're willing to take bigger risks for the bigger values. Something that's less prevalent but also problematic is in a percentage of cases, the costs have gone up significantly. We're seeing some cases where medical costs are 5 or 6 times what's customary in a region, or what would be considered, reasonable and normal. And that can certainly scuttle any sort of realistic settlement discussions. But plaintiff counsel are reluctant to acknowledge that those costs are perhaps inflated, and instead are using those to try and drive up numbers. There's more reliance and use of mock juries and focus groups, which allows parties on both sides, I think, to hone their arguments and determine what's going to resonate. And I think, that's a good thing. That's become easier. It's become more cost effective with the adoption of Zoom, right? Zoom has sort of changed the way we do everything's depositions, mediations, but it also makes it easier to assemble a mock jury or a focus group and present your case at a more efficient value. But essentially, right, the technology is making it a little bit of a Wild West out there. And, I think there's definitely cause to step back, evaluate, and adapt practices.
Jason, in the big picture, I mean, do you feel like you're seeing a pace of evolution, a pace of change, other than maybe a mock juries and focus groups? Are you seeing a pace of change on the defense side that's similar to what you're seeing on the plaintiff side, or do you feel like the plaintiff side is moving faster in some way and adopting new things differently?
No, and I think that's one of the reasons that we're here, is that you're asking to turn the Titanic when you're asking for big insurance companies, any insurance companies, big corporations, to adapt to new processes and change the way that they do things, and that takes time. But it's got to happen. You've got to recognize that what do they say? That's the way we've always done it, are the most expensive words in business, and you have to adapt your practices.
Yeah, okay, good. JD, let me ask you a question. I was just with a whole group of friends in Chicago, many of them attorneys, and one of them said, we are seeing and believe we can identify every time we get an even up package now. They share similar format structures. They're evidence rich. There's just one citation after another. They're recognizable. And all of a sudden, we're seeing them in Chicago. Do you see them in your practice? You have a practice that obviously spans, many, many jurisdictions, but do you believe you can identify them, number one, and are you seeing more of them, number two?
Yes and yes, Taylor. So especially with Even Up, obviously there are multiple formats that plaintiffs are using on these demand letter outputs. Even Up is just the single most popular, and from what I've seen, the best from a plaintiff point of view as well. That you can see the same kind of general organization and font on the even up, and then some others that other technology that's out there, whether it's Eve, whether they're just using a open source platform. We see a lot of that as well, of where you really see it a lot with some of your smaller firms, of where the smaller firms that to Jason's point, maybe don't have the army of 8 case managers and 8 legal assistants, and all of a sudden you get this 15-page letter that runs through medicals, that runs through case law, that runs through a liability analysis, that runs through juries, and you start seeing those very frequently. Short answer is that yes, we're seeing a lot of those, and as you mentioned, Taylor, we run. Our firm is basically up and down the East Coast, and I'm receiving referrals every day for different jurisdictions. And a lot of time the referral stems from one of these very lengthy demand letters that we've received, or that the carrier has received, and they're sending it over to us to respond to or to start the investigation on it.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I see statistics, which I'm probably not as well versed in as I should be, but I mean, in some lines of business, maybe commercial auto, some claim executives are telling me 60% of those claims pre-lit are represented. And if I hear you correctly, they're getting complex demand packages in that environment, reaching out to their defense firms for assistance, even though the case may not be litigated. Do I understand that correctly?
It is. You're understanding it correctly, Taylor. And to me, it's problematic in a couple of ways. First off, these, I would say we're in 2 of the 3 states that probably have the most stringent time limit demand issues.
Yep.
South Carolina and Georgia. Throw in Texas and Stowers. Throw in California in there as well. These. Even Up, as an example, has a setting that knows if you're in one of these states of where it can put in a lot of the hoops that you have to jump through to have a valid Holt demand or to make a valid Tiger River demand.
Yep.
So it's very advanced in terms of doing that. When our carriers are receiving this, without question, we are seeing a higher number of pre-suit referrals to us because, in my opinion, of the richness of the demand letter that the carrier is getting. And so, from a total claim expense, that's not good either, and it's not good for the law firms, that most of whom are very overworked right now. Again, I'm not trying to suggest that my clients shouldn't send work to our firm. We like that. But I do think that these letters are so good, and so different than what we saw 5-10 years ago, that is leading to a greater number of cases being referred out to law firms as well, in a pre-suit fashion.
Yeah, in the pre-suit environment. I mean, what jumps out at me is if I'm a claim professional, maybe I'm handling mostly non-litigated files, and all of a sudden I'm given this demand package. My assumption is that can be overwhelming for the individual claim handler who may be less experienced than someone in the lit unit down the hall. And my first order of business is to bring in outside defense counsel, someone I can say, help me with this in some way. Do you perceive that's an accurate portrayal of what's happening?
Yeah, it might be, Taylor. I mean, a lot of it's coming from the litigated side of the house, and whether that was just passed to the litigated side and then it gets passed to us, rather than the pre-claim. But again, I think it's because in some respect, so again, there are 2 different issues there. One is, if it's a true time limit demand, I understand the need to send that to outside counsel.
Right.
If you're in a state that's got those teeth, it makes sense to do so. But I think when perhaps the claim has been looked at and there's a certain value that is put in reserves, or a certain estimated value, and all of a sudden this 10-page demand letter comes in that is changing this purported value of the $75,000 case into a very well supported $4 million case, I do think the send it to counsel button is getting hit more often than it used to.
Okay. All right. Good. That's very helpful. All right, Ron. Obviously, SigmaSight is a company that's developing and I'll paraphrase this badly, AI enabled offer packages, responses to demand packages, or in fact something in advance of a demand package if the case is set up the right way. They're trying to level the playing field. You've been a very early adopter of this technology and you've used these offer packages. I'm thinking of the very scenario that JD just sort of outlined. Can you talk a little bit about your reaction to the product, but more importantly, as you've started to use it, what kind of results you're getting? And I think the corollary to that is, do you think this is the wave of the future as defense teams try to get ahead of this?
Oh, thanks, Taylor. And we're doing a pilot with Sigma Sight, but to circle back a little bit to what you and JD were referencing, I think the thing that makes me lose sleep the most right now is plaintiff attorney's real goal is to blow the top off our limit, right? And so many states with these time limit demands, it only takes one file for to get by where my claims people don't recognize the true exposure at the end of the day and reject the demand, a limits demand, and suddenly it gets supplemented with a couple $100,000 in medical bills, and I have a real problem of applying my limit to the top of that exposure. So that goes back to resources and then pivots into what can we do to give our people the most resources to identify those files as early as possible, and then the support to manage those as well. And that's where the adoption of AI is so critical with the claims environment. And we're really trying to manage AI and utilize our claim resources to get away from institutional claim handling and then do a more visionary type of claim approach and a claim posturing to, and I think that the key pivot with that is one size doesn't fit all claims anymore, right? I think the total litigation management approach was go through your discovery, your written discovery, depose everybody, wait for your demand, let the plaintiff in the piece control. Universally in preparing cases for litigation and for ultimately for trial. And I think now you have to really be compartmentalized in your evaluations early, identify where the exposure comes from, and partner with your law firms on a really cultural basis more than a transactional basis to understand that early on we need to have meetings between the insured, the adjuster, and the defense attorney to refine our strategy, identify the key points of what do we really need to get to settlement, how are we going to build our case as efficiently as possible, and then how are we going to present that. And for us, especially in the pilot model, is we're really trying to be proactive. We're using AI to organize arguments and to aggregate the claim notes, aggregate the defense counsel work product, and streamline the negotiation points so that our folks that are even our younger, less experienced career professionals have an outline that's really dimensional as to our arguments. And as to negotiations, then I think the key that we try to teach is, look, plaintiff attorneys want to get you focused on the number, right? I think the number one rule when you talk to plaintiff attorneys is we know the more we ask for, the more we get, right? And I think our key is negotiate to your evaluation and to your settlement range and put them at risk as early as possible. So we're trying to move the timeline up on plaintiff's depositions, look at what really is important, and then focus on what's the outcome going to be. And having that early meeting to provide that and put them at risk as fast as possible. And then utilizing the product itself, it's been super interesting on the results. First, the result to the defense attorney. I think there's a little bit of panic when you give it to a defense attorney cold because all the work product is everything is aggregated through AI and they lose hours, right? Because all that time that it takes to put the mediation statement together, organize the arguments, is billing hours, soft billing hours, we call them, right? In terms of time they get to bill. Now that's all done on an AI basis and they're losing that revenue. So then culturally, I think it's our job to make sure the volume matches that so that we're not putting them in a less profitable position as a partner as well in that piece. And then the second part is the dimensions of the negotiation so your staff's consistent. So your 5-year person and your 20-year person have the same outline They're approaching it the same, and they're focused on the arguments and the settlement range and the evaluation, and not the exaggerated demand and trying to meet that in the middle. And the interesting piece as well with the population we have with the plaintiff attorneys, every case so far has had huge ROI for us. We've had several cases that have come in under our settlement evaluation that was provided by counsel. And we've also had good feedback from plaintiff attorneys that will provide the actual AI report to them. And the other key point I want to touch on is the AI report isn't just AI product. It's AI blended with humanism and with human work product, right? Which is super important in the process because it's not like the old Colossus days. If you're old enough to remember, hey, you punt it to the computer and it gives you a range and that's your defined range. This is a resource and a tool to aggregate data for the human claims handler to review, develop, prioritize, evaluate, and then negotiate. And the plaintiff attorneys honestly have said, look, this product's allowed me to have really deep conversations with my client and talk them down from 7-figure settlements to a couple cases 5-figure settlements effectively. So it's new, it's innovative, it's anytime you change, especially with claims people, I got 4 or 5 people on my staff. If I move their stapler in their desk, they have a heart attack for the day, right? So to give them a new resource to use like this, it's hard to get the buy-in. They don't want to do it. They don't want to make offers before they get demands. That really throws them out of their linear approach. But these are the things on that core group of files can really be difference makers on a margin basis for the life of file, the investment, the overhead, the A-lay, the whole 9 yards that way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's superb. I mean, yeah, I think if you said it once, you said it 3 times. It's about the plaintiff attorney wanting the focus to be on the number that they provided. And it sounds to me, particularly with your last comment about making offers in advance of that number being put out there, that you view that to potentially be something that's going to be done more often in the future. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems to me that if anchoring has such a strong impact, that is their focus is like, let's start with this number. We can work from there. That the defense doing the same thing. No, let's start with this number. We can work from here. Sounds like it's something you believe in philosophically.
much so, and especially in that core group of claim files that have those characteristics that make that most effective, right? And I think those are files where you have one insured defendant, one plaintiff, and they're very straightforward. And it's pretty simple to figure out how to put them at risk and what number puts them at risk and do that as soon as possible. And then I think the second part institutionally is you have to have the conviction to hold on that number or try the case, right? I think as an industry basis, we have to try more cases in the right places. And we all hear about these huge nuclear verdicts, but for every nuclear verdict, there's what, 10, 20, 30 defense verdicts that don't get advertised, right? And we have to hold on to those and realize, look, if you're a plaintiff firm model, 1 out of 10 pays you a huge return, but those other 9 are getting compromised, and it's all case selection and having the confidence in your team to identify the right cases to manage in that style.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, good. Jason, JD, I have a question for both of you together, although probably best answered sequentially. Both of you are involved in initiatives that relate to sort of change on the defense side. And JD, your firm is very involved in leading some discussions for the CLM's task force on litigation and so forth. The core question is this. I mean, what do you perceive as, the top 1, top 2 issues for the defense in the big picture if we fail to begin adopting technology in a way that the plaintiff bar has? And maybe JD, I'll start with you.
Sure. So I think we're already seeing it, Taylor. I think the plaintiff's bar is light years ahead of us. And their organization, to me, there's been 2 pinnacle moments for the plaintiff's bar over the last 15 or 20 years that are 2 large parts in the dynamic shift of not just nuclear verdicts and indemnity, but what I would call nuclear settlements as well. One was already existing thoughts, but that came together in the reptile theory in the 2009 book, and then all the teachings that happened 2010, 2011, 2012, that where plaintiff lawyers together figured out the hot button issues to put juries, to get them to act more visceral in their awards, and to not have defense counsel prepared. And one of the keys there was that plaintiffs' firms were more organized and more strategic at the beginning of their case than they ever were, pre-reptile theory. I think Gen AI is doing the same thing on the plaintiff's bar, that those initial demand letters are also organizing their thoughts, their strategies, and their themes at the very outset of the case. And when we as the defense bar do not adopt ways to react to those, do not adopt ways to put our best foot forward immediately, that case is going to stay open longer. We all know cases that stay open longer cost more, period. But in today's world, with third-party litigation finance and everything else, when these cases are staying open longer, and if you got a small player that's got a fairly reasonable number, or to Ron's point, you could get them to a fairly reasonable number early on by putting some really good negotiation skills out there, and you fail to do so, that is exactly the firm that goes and gets funding where the big gun is brought in and your price just went 5 to 10x what it would have been had we adopted ways to jump in early and respond in a meaningful manner.
Yeah, that's great. Jason, what do you think? What's the risk to the defense side of failing to close this gap?
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, I mean, I will piggyback on what JD said. I mean, it's increased cost. It's incrementally paying more when you either shouldn't be, don't have to, can avoid doing so. As I said, the most expensive words in business, or that's the way we've always done it. Someone also said, the key to litigation is finding out what the other side wants and how to give it to them. And that's a big oversimplification of the process, but it's a great mindset to adopt if you want to get claims settled. And by and large, plaintiff counsel simply want to settle the case. I mean, that's their main goal. Sure, they're going to give a big number and try and anchor to that, but information is power, but not if you keep it to yourself. And so if you can either get something to them before they even put a demand out there that suggests what a reasonable resolution to the claim might be, or after a demand, something that counters that and says, well, here's what we think is more reasonable, or why your information might not stand up. You got to take advantage of those opportunities. You got to do that sooner. I mean, Taylor, your studies show that the vast majority of claims settle way later than they should, without any benefit from the additional time.
Yeah, no, that sort of ties it all together for me, Jason. I mean, I think, JD, this will be a very quick question for you, but I know when SigmaSight started this market examination of what are the benefits of AI generated offer letters and carefully organized, persuasive, compelling arguments, all that, they went immediately to claim organizations and they said, do you do offer packages? Because we see demand packages. And the answer was generally not, because they're too expensive to prepare. They're time intensive, they're laborious. And that's just one issue is the cost. The other is the issue that Jason just mentioned, which is, we're not sure we want to put out our arguments all in one place. Can you just walk us through very quickly? And I'd say this in light of the staffing crisis that has affected the entire defense bar community, just in terms of resources, not having to. Is it as laborious as claim organizations think it is, or SigmaSight might be solving an unnecessary problem? It is laborious to put together these packages. Is that an accurate statement?
It's a very accurate statement that if you're going to have a meaningful response to these packages, carriers would need to authorize and allow for firms to engage in the research needed, to respond to the medical issues that are in there, to respond to the liability issues that are in there. And I mean, Taylor, I can tell you, single digit percentage is, I would say, how often we are asked to respond in a meaningful manner to a demand package like that. I do think, Taylor, to your point and to what Jason was saying, and I think in light of what we're seeing indemnity wise across the industry and have for the last few years, that the mantra has changed during the time that I've been doing this. When I first started, it was you hold all your cards until trial because we were trying cases back then. And then it was, all right, now let's use mediation as as the time to maybe really put your full foot forward and your strategies forward. But to Ron's point, by that point, you've already gone through discovery. You've already spent tens of thousands of dollars in defending the case. I think the time is correct and now to try and not even get to that stage, which is not good for me and Jason on some cases if we don't get to those mediations. But the current strategies are clearly not working for us as well as perhaps some additional strategies could.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Ron, so this ties everything back in. So JD's being asked on single digit percentages to put together comprehensive packages. It's complicated. There's less staffing resources in defense firms these days. Obviously, Sigma Sight's package is bloop, right there pretty quickly, available to go. You talked earlier about having to work with defense counsel differently in this context, particularly if now all of a sudden your claim professional's walking in and saying, not for nothing, but this is an offer package. This is sort of a compilation of everything you, the defense attorney, have told us about this case. It's neatly organized. You mentioned there might be some initial reaction to that on part of the defense attorneys. How is it that claim organizations can facilitate this? Like, this is a new tool that we're using. We believe it'll be help. It should not threaten you as the defense attorney. Can you talk through how you might conduct that conversation?
And again, it's compartmentalized. So in the book of claims business, one size isn't going to fit all, right? You got to identify, hey, look, your large exposure claims on the damages or multi-defendant issues, I think are still going to fundamentally require more of an institutional, old school approach of written discovery documentation. But for the cases we've identified that either come in first notice of suit, but they're premises slip and fall cases, they're car accidents with one or two injuries, that type of thing. I think that the beginning part is the whole staffing piece in terms of, I think there's so much pressure both for claims departments and for defense firms that the work gets stacked up faster than it can get done, right? And I think one of the key elements we're really focusing on is the ROI to the staffing model so that our folks can really do a comprehensive front-end investigation, right? So ideally, the cases don't come in with suit. Our folks can do, I call them the old school investigation, right? Recorded statements, diagrams, police reports, witness contact, the whole 9 yards. So that when suit's finally filed, I think it all goes back to, and really that front end meeting. I think the volume and the staffing model is so high right now and there's so much work. And I was a multi-line adjuster, a field adjuster, and I'm always going to be thinking from the claims desk and how stretched and how hard that job is, right? And we want them to call people and talk to them, but they have more work than time and it's easier to email. But hey, customer service and just balancing out all the requirements from the front end management for that desk is really, really hard, and we have to be empathetic to that. But I really think then it's about even bringing the insured in. Typically, right now, when we send a file to JD's firm, it's, hey, here's a suit. You send it over. There's not really a lot of discussion. The attorney works up the management plan, the strategy, sends you your 30 or 60-day report with the plan, and then it starts, right? Written discovery, the whole 9 yards. we need to be more proactive. We need to do more on the front end. And then we need to bring the insured in, the defense attorney, the claims professional, even management sometimes, and sit down and say, hey, here's what we have. What do we really need to get to the point where we can evaluate this case using all the tools we have, right? What we have, what do we need? Do we need full medical discovery, or would we stipulate to the medical if we go to trial tomorrow anyways? Do we need to find out how good of a storyteller is our insured compared to the plaintiff, and then feel that, hey, our evaluation is 95% Loctite. Now we can implement that. We have that optical evaluation. We use the AI tools to bring it all together for us. It aggregates the work. It saves hours for the defense attorney, hours for the claims professional, comes out with the points. You circle back together. Okay, here's our settlement range. How do we get there? Does the claims professional lead the negotiation, the attorney? Who's got the relationship? Do we good cop, bad cop? How do we put them at risk? Should we call? Do we need a mediation? That type of approach. But the details, nobody has time for the details to be totally effective anymore, right? And that's where the plaintiffs are so good. I assume that most of the big time plaintiff firms have databases on all of my claims professionals in every division within my company. And same for all of my competitors in the insurance business, right? That their data is so good that we need to be proactive and we need to understand that they know more about us than we know about ourselves sometimes. And how do we effectively do that? Putting them at risk, organizing arguments, providing that consistency, and empowering our people with our defense attorneys in that same culture to be proactive. And I think the part that really closes the loop is getting your insured bought into the process to that commitment. Here's what we're going to do. We may end up in trial. Will you commit to us that when we get to trial, you'll be there to partner with us, right? And use that full approach to get there. And I think that the AI tool, SigmaSights tool, brings it together so that when you look at the aggregation of hours on a billing record, that used to be 40, 80, 90 hours. I think now it's cutting that down to 25, 30 hours, and you're saving at least a 30% ROI just from automation, right? And use of the AI in that piece.
That's helpful. I mean, you're stressing the staffing workload, the lack of time, everybody's backed up with their files, I think is particularly relevant. I think you were one of the first claim executives to look at the SigmaSight model and think about it in terms of internal claims staff, hourly reduction of time required to do X, Y, and Z. And if my recollection is correct, you had given this tool to one of your most senior, most experienced, one of your best negotiators, file professionals, claim professionals. They had identified, they thought the tool had saved them 3.5 hours in preparation for a mediation, right? And all I remember thinking was, well, 10 of those files would give the guy a week. I mean, that adds up pretty quick, right? So that's
Yep.
it's interesting that you approach it that way because clearly, while I'm obsessed with staff challenges on the defense attorney side and the difficulty in getting new talent and retaining talent, it's just as real in the claim organization environment too. People are fighting for good people. And in fact, if I recall correctly, the person in question here that you had tasked with using this tool to start because he was so good had been chased by several other carriers in order for you to get him. So
We've
anyway,
been recruiting him for quite a while, and he's amazing and gets great results. And another important point with the product is we hit a fork in the road. How do we utilize this? Do we use this as a resource for us and just allow the attorney and our claims professional to negotiate? Or do we just send it to the plaintiffs themselves directly, right? And we really had a lot of debate about that. And then we tested both models. And the model is sending it directly to the plaintiff attorneys and letting it speak for itself has been by far the most effective, right? In terms of they get to see it. And back to JD's point, transparency today, you don't hold a lot back for trial on these core cases, right? You're better off putting it all out there, making a fair offer. And I think that's another important part. You can't be transparent and offer short money. You have to put fair money on the table to put them at risk so the plaintiff can have a good conversation with his client as well. And that wraps it up in terms of the front end meeting with the defense attorney, and again, the cultural piece, because the investment of hours does shrink for the firms. And we got to realize, look, we got to help perpetuate the future of defense attorneys as an industry. And that's letting more younger people get into files, picking tools like this to help them be more effective, and giving them the volume so that they can function and have the resources themselves.
In the interest of time, let me jump just ahead in terms of the questions that I had in mind for you guys. And Jason, I think I'll start with you. These are, just give me 90 seconds sort of top end on this, very high level, because this is very much about arming our defense industry for modern negotiations. What's one defense negotiation practice you would change or suggest should be changed that you think the defense is more likely to do today that they should not do in modern negotiations?
I'll get to that in a second because I want to
Sure.
piggyback on what Ron and JD were saying, because I want to give you guys a secret, and I think this will be helpful. The biggest impediment to cases settling is the belief that they can't settle. And the biggest incentive to a case settling is the belief that it can settle. So if you put $2,000 on a $50,000 case, you're going to litigate it for 2 years. And if you put $20,000 on a $50,000 case, there's a chance you get it resolved for $40,000. If you wait, it may take 60. But so now, if you take those numbers and you tether information and statistics and data to why your numbers are legitimate, you're gonna have significant influence and persuasive effect on the other side. Now, to your question, Taylor, specifically, I would say one thing that I think everybody should be doing, claims people and defense counsel, in maybe accelerating the time frame for getting claims resolved and making it a little easier is asking more questions. Questions of yourself. What's my goal here? How am I going to approach this? What am I dealing with on the other side? What kind of strategy and negotiation style do I need to apply? And questions of the other side. What are you looking for? How can we perhaps accelerate this? Is there anything that I can do for you?
Fantastic. JD?
Don't tie your offers to the demands. That I think that's a common defense and carrier strategy. Is, I know this case is worth 500,000, or that's where we want to end up, but the plaintiff is at 12 million, so I'm just going to offer 10,000 right now. Again, I'm not suggesting you jump to 500,000 either, but to kind of what Jason's point was of move to at least 20 of the 50, so that there's meaningful discussion there. And I think that negotiating to the plaintiff's demand is where a number of negotiations and mediations stall out, and you end up spending a bunch of money before you get to the real number that's down the road.
Even before I turn to you, Ron, with that very same question, I wanted to comment, JD, because I thought you'd appreciate this, because I agree with that wholeheartedly. As you guys know, I'm sort of tied into the community of organizations that are coming with AI products trying to help the defense industry, right? And I just got approached with a product, and the product was, we will help claim organizations. This is not a SigmaSight product, though their tool does very similar things. But the whole focus of this product was, you give us the plaintiff demand, we'll help you refute it. And to me, that's the same as tying your number to the plaintiff demand, in this sense that what the plaintiff has left out of their demand are all the defensibility and liability points and causation points that help the defense. So the idea of spending your time refuting someone else's framing of the case, in my view, is an incomplete process. What you really want to do is refute what they're saying, but introduce all the stuff they've left out, which helps your case. And that to me is the difference with sort of the SigmaSight piece. But anyway, that's my own ramble. Ron, what would you, it's a little unfair to ask you this question because you've never done things exactly like the rest of the defense industry to start. So maybe comment on from a broader perspective and say, what do you think the defense industry should change?
No, and I totally agree with JD's point, right? And it's internally we have that same frustration where the egos get in the way of the negotiation, right? And you offer low because the demand's so high. And you're not negotiating until both sides are at risk, right? When they're at 5 million and you're at 2,000, you're not negotiating. It's when you're at 100 and they're at 200 and it's going to settle in between that they're starting to get at risk. But for us, it's more about holding on to the core story of we're changing our practices to get to depositions faster, right? Because the written evidence, even the expert testimony doesn't matter compared to the presentability of the insured defendant and the plaintiff. And we're sending our folks to watch depositions now on a routine basis, and we're making those optic assessments. Can this plaintiff tell a story and present well that would compel people to give them money? And if the answer is no, we're going to figure out what number is fair to everybody and offer it. And if they want to try the case, we'll try it. If the answer is yes, they're very compelling, they tell a great story, we're empathetic, we're going to pay more money early and try to resolve that case and even overpay that to a small percentage to resolve and prevent the ultimate. They only get worse when they have good actors that can tell great stories. So ours is still the emotional optic piece of evaluating the players that are going to tell the story, not the data of the demand and the offer, and trust ourselves on that piece.
Jason, Ron is one of the few people that I know when he teaches at the Litigation Management Institute. He talks, perhaps in a way unlike other claim executives, about sort of the human aspect of storytelling, for lack of a better term. He's constantly talking about the power of storytelling, and you could hear it in his prior comments in terms of who's the better storyteller, the plaintiff or the defendant, all that kind of stuff. Can you talk a little bit about your perception of the written word as opposed to just verbal storytelling that you see in mediation? Do you see the defense come with do you ever see the defense come with compelling written storytelling arguments designed to change minds or reframe the conversation or whatever it may be? Is that something you see as a mediator?
You do. It's less frequent than the plaintiff coming with that. But I think both are important. At the end of the day, with a lot of these cases, the numbers are sending a message, and you can simply look at the numbers and see where they're going. But before you do all of that, unless you've heard the stories from each side, whether it's verbally, whether it's in writing, and you feel that I guess that the plaintiff feels that their story has been at least heard and listened to, and I'd say vice versa, right? Neither side's going to get anywhere until they've been able to tell their story and feel that they've been heard and understood. That doesn't mean that you need to disagree, but that's when you can start talking about the numbers, and then there's context behind those numbers and they make sense. And then you don't need to beat a dead horse and keep having those arguments every time you exchange numbers, but then there's meaning to the numbers, and they send their own message.
Okay, all right, that's helpful. I mean, when I think of the defense, I tend to think more of the written narrative as being supportive of the number that's being put in place. Ron, for example, talked about a desire to try more cases. And to do that, having the statistics to understand what the real risk of a trial in this venue with this attorney might be. And obviously part of what SigmaSite is bringing to the table is this whole data component that says, hey, not for nothing, we're making an offer. And along with the offer, as an option, is the ability to tell the plaintiff attorney, the opposing party, by the way, these are your risks if you go to trial. This is how the judge rules. This is what the jury demographics look like. Do you feel that the defense would be emboldened or empowered by having those statistics at a mediation of saying, hey, this is our number, but there's a reason behind the number?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anything I think the more information, the better. Like I said, information is power. So the more of it, the more power
Right.
you have. If you can give either the mediator and or plaintiff attorney something to talk about with the plaintiff, the ultimate decision maker, as to what the risks are and what they're going to face, and why perhaps everything isn't as the way their attorney is portraying it. That's effective.
Okay, so let me keep you on the spot a little bit further. So this is you giving advice to JD and Ron. They have a beautiful looking offer package. It's replete with data. It's got all the arguments outlined. What's their better strategy? Give it to you to work with? Give it to the plaintiff attorney in advance of the mediation? Keep it to themselves and just be the smartest guys in the room and never share the document? What strategy should they employ?
Well, how much do claims people and defense counsel like getting new information from the plaintiff attorney on the morning of the mediation? Not very much, right? So I would say get it out there, right? If you want everything from the plaintiff in 30 days before the mediation, so that you can do your internal processes, I'd say the concept is similar. Um, Let the plaintiff attorney see this, discuss it with their client. Some time for it to marinate and for them to digest it. You know, I think that's more effective. Now, um, like Ron says, there's no one answer for everything, and you may have to adjust that based on who your opposition is, right? I mean, there are different plaintiff attorneys, some of whom are more aggressive, and you have to recognize that. And then there are others who, I think are perhaps going to be more reasonable and open and will welcome that information. So again, go back to questions. Maybe ask them. Look, would providing some information as to how we're evaluating the case be helpful to you?
I've always enjoyed your suggestion to ask a question. It's the most powerful form of communication, right? Nah, that's my joke. Okay, JD, Ron, this for both of you guys. You both talked about this, Ron. I mean, JD, you talked about it specifically. Is this idea that the defense bar has historically been, and I don't mean the bar, defense teams have historically been, this is the way I was trained. I was trained in the 1980s because I'm that old. I was trained never to reveal your best arguments. Either you might need them later or you're giving away the strategy. The concept of offer packages morphs into, hey, let's hit them with our best arguments right now, early in the case. So that we can anchor, we can frame and control the narrative. Can you talk about how difficult that is for people on the defense side to share their strongest arguments, holding nothing in reserve? How uncomfortable is that for the defense bar, JD?
I would say it's quite uncomfortable for the defense bar as a whole. Especially for those of us who have been in the industry for decades. All of us, whether on the defense, on the law firm side or the industry side, we're really kind of taught to hold that information. And I do think it's case by case. I think there might be some cases in which you've got some really good information that maybe you are going to hold back for a little bit, that you can pull out of an offer package theoretically. But it took us a long time, Taylor, to come around the defense side, to come around with the concept of counter anchoring, of giving a number to a jury,
Right.
explaining it to a jury. And so if we know that only represents 2.5 or 3% of our cases, giving the jury all of your information, giving them a number with good explanation and data as to why that's your number. Why wouldn't we do the same thing at an earlier stage in the vast majority of cases?
Okay, Ron?
I don't feel like I've said enough about the power of the product either, right? In terms of, I think when you're a claims professional that's been doing this for a while and you hear an AI offer package, you feel it's probably the same as the work product you're getting out of your claims professionals and your defense attorneys. and it's just faster. And I'm rolling up on 30 years in this business, and I will tell you unequivocally, the offer package is going to have points and arguments and dimensions that neither the adjuster, the defense attorney, or the plaintiff attorney considered. And I think that's the part where I've always tried to create layers of arguments for negotiations and fallback and point and counterpoint in the mental preparation. The AI tool is so dimensional and so detailed that it brings things through that when you read it for the first time, there's things you should have caught, but you didn't, just because of regardless pace, details, what have you, that it pulls out that you read it and you're like, that's totally accurate. How did I even not use that as one of my central themes, right? So from that point of view, you can't underestimate the product and the effectiveness. And then when the plaintiff and the plaintiff attorney read that, it's illuminating because they've been working the case up forever how long, and they learn about their own case too and some weaknesses that happen that give Jason the bullets to go in there and say, did you consider this? And they're like, no, we didn't consider that. And suddenly you go from 7 figures to mid 6 figures, right? And that type of thing. So I think that can't be overstated from the work I've seen with this. The dimension and the detail is just really beyond most average work product and even excellent work product.
No, you're nice to mention that. I don't know. I was on a task force subcommittee meeting the other day, and a industry colleague of JD's from a different firm had said that his firm had been experimenting with some AI tools. And what he volunteered was that he started from the premise of evaluating whether the output from the AI tools he was using would be as good as what his attorneys could have done. And what he was astounded to find out, and he didn't want to acknowledge publicly, was that it was better than what his attorneys could come up with. So I think that's something that all of us in this new era, in this new space, are sort of grappling with in a positive way. But we're like, this is good. So the question culturally for me is, how do we begin to incorporate this into what, in my view, is the most critical component of claim management outcomes? I mean, for commercial carriers, what they're paying in the settlement of litigated files is their biggest expense. Now, you add into that what JD references, the number of times they're getting referrals on non-litigated files because, somebody has pumped out an AI-generated demand package with a time limit, and it's important to get their partners help. Negotiation is really, everything. And JD, I was struck by the fact that the whole holdback argument, that's the way I was taught, was to hold back. But that's because we were trying cases, right? I mean, I don't know how many claim leaders I've talked to in the last year who would tell me that they're trying more than 2%, and the vast majority are trying less than 1%. So for 99 out of 100 cases, it's going to resolve through negotiation, all in Jason's mediation room. And the question is, what can the defense do there in our new modern environment where AI is doing stuff that might even be more dimensional, as Ron said, than what we've all done traditionally? What can the defense be doing in Jason's room to get these things resolved? Assuming it gets that far. So with just 3 minutes left here, let me ask you guys to do sort of a round horn. Got no previous questions on this whatsoever. It's to take the title of the webinar and have you advise all of your colleagues in the industry. What's the one thing that you think they need to do to modernize negotiation practices in insurance defense to advance their game? Jason, I'll start with you.
Well, again, too, and I'm just going to say more negotiation training because everybody out there is negotiating. It's a skill. You can be better, and a lot of people don't recognize that. But Ron's comment and your comments made me think, right, oftentimes on these few cases that do get tried, juries make decisions based on things that the parties never even thought about, right? You go in and you find out that they made their decision based on something that maybe wasn't even discussed at trial, right? So parties are going through these things for years without knowing, what the key issue is, or what is going to make the difference. If you can use AI to come up with some of those concepts at the outset, I mean, I think that's a game changer. So I would say, adopt AI. It really is. It's pretty incredible.
Great. JD?
Innovate, innovate the methodology that we use. Get rid of, and both through technology and just through the methods of, we've talked about, holding back information and not responding to demand packages, and waiting until after discovery to really, or waiting to get in Jason's room before you really start engaging in negotiation. Just innovate all that. Again, that may be the right move for a case here and there, but just be willing to change the method and put it on its head.
Do you think defense firms will embrace these new innovative approaches?
Taylor, I mean, I don't know if you know this or not, but defense firms love to innovate. They're some of the most innovative people out there, insurance defense lawyers. So I say that obviously sarcastically. There will be a lot of pushback on a lot of this because you still have a lot of mindsets of hold the information, do it the old-fashioned way.
Right.
But I think we're just seeing, again, I think defense lawyers, if they're being honest, are seeing a change in our opposition and the organization that they have, the technology that they have, and we're all clearly seeing it in the value of the cases that we are dealing with. So I'm kind of hoping that known increase in indemnity and settlement value will open up the industry to make these changes and innovate.
Good. And I'm completely destroying the round robin concept, but does the staffing crisis on the defense firm side actually create some freedom and some opportunity to do this innovation? Seems to me the balance of power has changed dramatically in terms of you're picking and choosing your cases and your clients now in a way that the defense bar never has before. Does that open up the opportunity to innovate on the defense bar side, you think?
It absolutely should. I mean, as you know, that's one of our biggest reasons of having adopted Gen AI pretty early.
Yeah.
Was to try and again, it's a tool, but to help with some of that talent crisis, to help so that the efficiency remains the same for our clients. And it's not just the lack of talent or the numbers that law firms in the industry is facing, the depth of knowledge that is exiting our industry is also at an all-time high. So any tool that you can add, like AI, helps us bridge that gap a little bit, both in terms of the numbers and the experience and knowledge.
Nicely said. Ron, best for last.
So I think Jason's spot on with the training. I think training is harder than ever. The environment's changed since COVID, that type of thing. I think relationships and the defense counsel carrier relationship really needs to be fundamentally changed. I think we need to find a way to get away from the hourly bill on a lot of these files and make it an incentivized outcome where defense counsel, the carrier are sharing the reward and for paying for results, right? And finding a way to create overrides, create results-based compensation rather than hourly-based compensation. And I think the last piece is for carriers, don't look to take AI and shrink your labor pool costs. Make your people more resourceful, shrink your pendings, give them the resources so they can do more and be more effective, and you'll marginalize your savings on the outcome basis and much more effectiveness, and you'll get better quality negotiators and more developed, polished professionals through giving them these resources and making expectations super clear. If carriers are just looking to reduce staff and use AI to eliminate overhead, it's going to be a disservice to the industry, their employees, and the culture of the defense bar and the defense claims industry working together.
Nicely said. The subcommittee on compensation for the CLM task force, litigation management task force, would love to have just the clip of you talking about the hourly bill and the changes to that. So kudos to you for that. I want to thank all three of you for doing this. The audience who participated today was lucky to have your expertise. And I want to thank all of you for your time and adding these thoughts to this critical industry issue. And thank you to SigmaSite for hosting this important topic and nice webinar. And I think that probably concludes the webinar for today. Yeah. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.